Hello everyone. In this video I'm going to talk through the process I used to make this line-side fencing using matchsticks and fuse wire. And if you're thinking that's not for me, can't be bothered with the hassle, I'd rather use a kit off eBay like this one, we'll get on in a minute or two to the assembly and installation, so hopefully there'll be some useful tips there for you. In my case I didn't want to do that because I've got quite a few to do. This is £5 plus postage for 50 posts, whereas on Amazon for 5,000 matchsticks it's at 10 quid, so 100 times as many for twice the price. Maybe you could share some with your friends at the Model Railway Club or something like that. I also think the end result looks better. The ones you get on eBay, they're laser cut, so they've kind of got burn marks down the sides of the post, and I think the wire's a little bit over scale compared to the ones I've done. So whether is it worth the effort? Well, let me know when you've seen what the process is. And if you're wondering what 5,000 matchsticks looks like, well, it's a lot, but at least I've got a lifetime supply. To turn matchsticks into fence posts, I made this little jig up using balsa on a bit of plywood. And this was just made from some scrap material. So if you're thinking it's looking complicated, don't worry, the bits we only care about are this bit here, which is where the matchstick's going to go. And as you can see, it's a straight edge with a angle. And basically that's so I can put the matchstick in a very set position relative to the piece of plywood, which is big enough for me to clamp to the pillar drill as so. And using the 0.4mm drill bit, I can drill a hole at the right position. And when I've done that for all of the matchsticks I want to use, I simply release the clamp, move the plywood into the next position, clamp it again, and then I can do the next hole. And the process is repeated in a chain-like fashion for all the matchsticks. And this just gets really consistent positions of the holes relative to the top of the match and between the holes themselves. And that's important not just for aesthetics, but for threading the wire through, as we'll come to later. Once I've got all the matchsticks drilled, I then use this fence treatment water-based stuff that I found lying around in the garage, as you might be able to tell, sorry for that, to give it a bit of colour. Just kind of pour it on in a little container. So there we go, I've now got a pile of matchsticks all drilled, and I'm now at the stage as if I'd bought a load of kits, except a little bit better off. And I can now start threading on the 5 amp fuse wire, which is what I'm using for the wire. I did consider using fishing line at this stage, but I found it was just a bit too flexible. It needed something with a bit more stiffness to get through the holes. So that's the reason that I went for this. As you can see, it's still a little bit fiddly using the fuse wire, so that's the reason I didn't use fishing line. I did find sometimes the end kind of bunched up a little bit and kind of got a bit difficult to thread through. So when that happened, just snip off the last centimetre or so with side cutters, and then you can carry on as before. I very deliberately decided to do all the threading on at the workbench for all the matchsticks that I needed to use as fence posts, and the reason for that was I wanted to do it where I had the better light, the more stable surface, rather than putting all the fence posts in and trying to thread it on while it's on the baseboard. I thought that would be really, really fiddly. That's why I did it like this. And once all the posts were on one bit of wire, I kind of bent the wire over at the end and put a bit of sticky tape over it just to make sure that I didn't go through the post again, and then measured it to the length I needed, gave a fair bit of spare, and cut it to size and folded over the other end as well. And the process is simply repeated until all the posts are on all the wires. I used 4 wires spaced about 4mm apart vertically. Like I say, the 0.4mm holes through the posts. For this section of fence I had about 40 posts on, so that's about 160 threadings. It took quite a while and it was a bit laborious and a bit fiddly at times, but I think there's no alternative really if you want a fence like this. So yeah, that's where we're up to. Time to go to the baseboard and have a look at installing it. The first thing to do is to draw a line with enough of a gap from the track to make sure that all my rolling stock wouldn't hit the fence. So I did that by having a coach, and then I kind of held a pencil to the middle of the coach and ran it around the corners, and then took that as the distance on the straight bits. And I used my scale ruler to mark up the gaps between the posts. I used about 9 feet in scale equivalent, which is about 36 millimeters from 4 millimeters to the foot. So I mark along those and then drill them. I used a 2.5 millimeter drill bit for this baseboard, but if you were using a foam or something, you might want a slightly smaller one. Then it's a case of placing the posts in one at a time, kind of loosely into the holes, running from one end to the other. So I start at the end where they're all kind of bunched together, spread them out and put one in each hole. You don't want to push it all the way down at this stage because you want to get the height precise. So I've got a technique for that. I'll show you that in a second. But first you just kind of place them all strung along like this all the way around the length. Then once that's done, the technique I use to make sure that they all kind of sit at the same height is to have this blue bit of foam. It's a fairly dense hard foam, and then I use a steel ruler to kind of press on each one, gradually building up a angle from left to right, but press each one until the ruler's flat on the bit of foam, and then the post is all at the same height along the length, and then shuffle around and kind of do that along the length of the curve. It wasn't all smooth sailing, unfortunately. I did have this one post that kind of failed, kind of snapped off as I was trying to press it down. Maybe I wasn't pressing down quite squarely, but I just decided to snap off the bit underneath. It was a bit tricky to do that because it was still kind of attached to one of the wires, but I just broke it off, and then it'll just look like the fence has been damaged in that place. It's probably quite realistic, really. The other hiccup I had was part way down one of the wires there was kind of a burn mark, and it was just too fat to pull all the posts through, so I had to kind of cut it there, and there's 3 strands on half the fence, so I might have to try and come back and sort that out later. It's a bit of a pain, but yeah, one of those things. I should have checked the wire for the full length prior to lacing it through all the posts. So then the final step was to wire off at the end around the post, kind of tied it round to secure it in place, and that's it. So yeah, let me know what you think. Was it worth me drilling all the holes myself, or should I bought a few kits from eBay? I think personally it was worth it because I prefer the look of these posts. I think it's more realistic with the sizing and not with the burn marks and stuff. But yeah, that's my opinion. What's yours? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video and you're interested in more model railway content, please do subscribe. Catch you next time.